We always learned afterwards, and so change could be very painful, but was around funding. Were some of the results of how much time it took to get money, the kinds of energy that went into it, the kinds of relationship we were going to have with the institutional world.
For the battered women's movement, we had to create our own model, and there was a lot of growing pains on the way. One of the difficult decisions is, do you accept government funding? And when you're trying to make things work and stay open and stay afloat and keep the shelter going, but then you give up something. You give up say, you give up power. And that was very difficult in the early days of the movement.
And the funders said, well, where's your board of directors? Who's the executive director? And so that is a roadblock to those societal norms of the patriarchy.
They didn't know whether to believe us or not. I mean, that it was so far out of the context of what they had ever funded before. We were talking about women calling who were being beaten, who were wanting to leave home. No, there was no place else for them to go. Well, how about, no, they can't. Well, what about the why? Well, and they were.
And this can't be a problem.
They couldn't.
And it was, right, they couldn't get that it was a problem.
And I can just remember one time saying, well, if somebody else is doing it, tell us, because we're like overcrowded.
So we really were making it up as we went along. And that involved learning from the residents themselves. The staff was almost entirely white. We knew that that was an issue and a problem. We were trying to look at women of color are in a different situation than white women too. We have to be aware of that and be willing to tackle racism, institutional racism where we find it as well. But like I say, I'm sure we missed much.
The movement had to shift and change to be inclusive of all voices and all perspectives. And there are culturally specific organizations. And working at CASA for years, and it does teach you to look at things from other perspectives. And it does have you step back and listen, step back and learn.
Every woman was served at Women's Advocates. I think the only thing that we were addressing was that it be culturally significant. I started as a staff person with the Spanish-Speaking Affairs Council. Part came up that there would be some funds available for the women of color to start a shelter. And the Women of Color movement designated that grant by the state to go towards a Latino shelter. I believe Lupe Serrano started to modify and meet the needs of the families that were being served as opposed to going to a shelter. We started understanding the cultural differences when families don't want to report, when families do not want a protective order. The Latino community is very close family knit. You're dealing with not only that one couple, you're dealing with the whole exposure of all of the community. So it's very delicate.
I was a co-founder of Women and Nations. With Mending the Sacred Hoop, we were still are, technical assistance provider to tribal grantees under the Violence Against Women Act. Resources from the federal government are allocated to the tribes, and that meant that the tribes then had funding to address violence against women. So it's been a dramatic shift in our society. I mean, you see the power and control wheel and TV shows. Violence against women is addressed and talked about in a way that wasn't acceptable at the time that women's advocates opened their doors.
In some ways, the staff was in a little bit more position of being able to accumulate some experience and then use a bit of our privilege to leverage, to get into the institutions in a way that a woman who was dealing with disruption, that total disruption of her life, wasn't about to advocate for.
We understood that we had to know what was available, that was one of the most important parts of what it meant to be an expert and to be a, quote, professional, was to be able to tell women what they could do, what their options were. So that we felt that was what it meant to be an advocate.
And
basically.
We really got to know our friends in every department.
Yeah. So
especially as an advocate myself, working in shelters, knowing the history of it and being a historian, that's, you know, I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. And these women cared so much. They didn't take salaries. They had their own kids sleeping on the floor so women and children could sleep in their beds. I mean, they sacrificed a lot for the community, and I think it's paid off.